It's a new month, and so that means we're going to decide which of these books I'm going to be reading by spinning this. It's time to play Fiction Roulette. So as always, I'm going to let the wheel decide what I'm going to read and review in the month of March. The wheel is filled with things that I'm really excited to read, and every month I spin the wheel 4 times. I usually read more than 4 books per month, but this just helps me to really just nail down these are 4 books that no matter what happens, I'm definitely going to read these books. And then on top of that, I'll let you know what the channel's book club has chosen for us to read together for the PBJ book club this month. I'll also let you know how you can join in and read along with us if you're interested. So let's start by talking about what's on the wheel this month. There's 10 options here, so I'm just going to quickly go through them all before I spin the wheel. So let's talk about book number 1, and that is Pupil by Stephen King. So whenever I talk about Stephen King books that I haven't read, Apt Pupil always comes up as one that I should definitely check out if I want to be completely disgusted, and I do. It's about a kid named Todd who, seems like your typical good kid, good grades, loving family, even has a little paper route, or paper round as we'd say in the UK. Then one day, he finds out that this guy in his neighborhood is actually a former, let's say, World War II baddie, right? That's an acceptable word to use for the YouTube algorithm. Instead of being horrified, as most people would, Todd, because he's young, sort of becomes weirdly fascinated by the fact that someone like this is living in his neighborhood. And that fascination turns into an obsession, and he ends up sort of building a twisted relationship with this man. Todd starts learning about the nature of darkness and how it can draw in an innocent mind. The story was originally published as a novella in Stephen King's collection Different Seasons. I haven't read that collection. I definitely should, because I think there's some absolute classics in there. It's supposed to be really chilling. I can imagine that it will be. It kind of explores dark human nature, moral decay, and how easily young minds can be influenced and seduced by depravity. It sounds pretty disturbing. Sounds pretty interesting though. The next book up for selection is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. So I've actually only ever read one John Steinbeck novel, which was Of Mice and Men. That's actually one of my all-time favorites. Definitely a top 10 book of all time for me. And so a lot of people have recommended East of Eden. It's about 2 families, the Trasks and the Hamiltons. They're living in California, and there's this massive rivalry between the 2 families. The story spans multiple generations and just covers decades. It's a real family saga as far as I know. The writing, as you would expect with Steinbeck, is supposed to be very poetic, very impactful. The characters are just incredibly complex and realistic. When it comes to reading, I'm all about the characters, and this book is supposed to have just the character depth is off the charts. Steinbeck actually considers this book to be his magnum opus. He wrote it for his sons so that they could understand their kind of family heritage. As I understand it as well, the story draws parallels to the biblical story of Cain and Abel, with one character just being showered with love and approval, while the other one carries this darkness, this cloud about him. So it's almost like a retelling of that explores how the absence of love can lead to destructive behavior. I always see this book mentioned in people's best books of all time. My top 10 books of all time, this one's always popping up. And it seems like it leaves a lasting impact on people. I'd like it to leave a lasting impact on me, please. Next book is Annihilation by Jeff VanderMeer. So this is about a team of female scientists. There's a biologist, a psychologist, a surveyor, and an anthropologist. Anthropologist is always a bit of a tongue twister for me, but aced it there, didn't I? Anyway, they get sent on this expedition into this mysterious place called Area X. And it's this weird off-limits zone where a bunch of other expeditions have gone before, and none of them ended well. That premise kind of reminds me a little bit of Roadside Picnic that I read recently and absolutely loved. If it's as good as that, then I'm going to love this book. So yeah, Area X is like this top secret location that's filled with a kind of phenomena that nobody can really explain. Yeah, it really does sound like Roadside Picnic. The story is told through the biologist's journal, and as they go deeper into Area X, they start running into some mysterious and creepy, mind-bending stuff. It gets super eerie, and they're all just trying not to end up like the previous teams that have gone on before them, who a lot of them have kind of lost their minds. I think this book is going to rely heavily on atmospheric writing, which is something I'm a massive fan of. It was on the wheel a few times now. I think it's maybe the third time it's been on the wheel. I know that some people were hoping that it got picked and then it didn't. Maybe this will be the month that it gets picked. Next up is a new entry, The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. So this book is about a young half-goblin who never expected to be emperor. You know, he's living a good life. He's so far down the line of succession, it's not something he really has to worry about. But when his father and all of his brothers suddenly die, he's thrown into the role of being an emperor and is completely unprepared. Now he has to kind of figure out how to navigate a world of political scheming and intrigue, all while dealing with like the prejudice that he's suffering and the distrust from other people around him because he's got like mixed heritage. This story is about him trying to make allies where he can find them and sort of like fill the role as best as he can, not just as a ruler, but also as someone who represents his family well. I've heard that the world building in this is just absolutely fantastic. The focus is much more, I think, on character growth and personal development rather than on like big action scenes or anything like that. A lot of fantasy with political intrigue that I've read that has a lot of backstabbing and kind of like little Machiavellian workings in the shadows, that sort of thing, is quite dark. Like, for example, Assassin's Apprentice is quite a serious, somber read at times. Joe Abercrombie's books are very dark and feature that kind of thing. But this is apparently a bit more hopeful, a bit less cynical. And it sounds like the main character is just genuinely trying to do the right thing, which is a nice change of pace. If you're looking for something that leans more towards what I would think of as like a Terry Pratchett style of fantasy rather than a George R.R. Martin style of fantasy, then probably this will be for you. So the fifth book is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. This is about a man who finds a suitcase full of drug money in the desert on like the Texas-Mexico border. He decides that, you know, since he's found it, finders keepers. And he's going to take it home and put it to good use. But this choice puts him in the crosshairs of a violent hitman and also a sheriff. And both of these characters are hunting him down. What's interesting about this book is that Cormac McCarthy originally wrote this as a screenplay before turning it into a novel. And that screenplay was then adapted into a film by the Coen brothers, which went on, I think, to win a bunch of Academy Awards, including Best Picture. I have seen the film. I thought it was brilliant. Javier Bardem was just incredible as the villain. Loved it. The book is supposed to be just like a really intense cat and mouse chase. The villain is terrifying in the film, but apparently he's even scarier in the book. There are also supposed to be some like really brutally realistic depictions of violence. Lovely. I love the film. I want to see if I love the book as much, you know. The next book on the wheel is Horns by Joe, I almost said Joe Abercrombie. I meant to say Joe Hill. I'm obsessed with Joe Abercrombie. I keep thinking about Joe Abercrombie. So Horns is a fantasy horror about a man who, in the beginning, he's living a bit of a charmed existence. He had a good upbringing with, I think, kind of like famous parents, and he's settled down with the love of his life, but everything falls apart after the murder of his girlfriend. From that point, everything spirals. And one morning, after a bit of a wild night of drinking, he wakes up with what he thinks is a hangover and a splitting headache, and then he reaches back and he realizes, hang on a minute, and he's actually started to grow horns. He soon discovers that these horns give him the power to make people reveal their darkest thoughts and their darkest desires. And so he decides that, do you know what? I'm going to put this power to use. And he uses it to investigate his girlfriend's unsolved murder. And this is a murder, actually, that a lot of people think that he is guilty of. And so he's determined to find the real killer and also to clear his name. I really like Joe Hill as an author. Just like his dad, Stephen King, he's great at writing characters. The concept sounds really unique. It's a nice mixture of supernatural elements and murder mystery that I can't remember having read before. Yeah, that mixture sounds pretty mental. And speaking of pretty mental, A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. So A Clockwork Orange is about a young man who is leading a gang in a dystopian version of London. They go about committing senseless, violent crimes until eventually he gets caught. And then he's given a choice. You can either go to prison or you can undergo an experimental treatment that takes away your ability to choose between good and evil. And the story kind of dives into the themes of free will and violence and how society can shape human behavior. I think one of the most well-known aspects of this book is the unique slang language called Nadsat, I think it is, which the main character uses to tell his story. And it's, I think, meant to sound like a futuristic teen dialect. The book was also adapted into a really famous and really controversial movie by Stanley Kubrick, which was banned in several countries because of its absurd and kind of perverse, violent content. I haven't seen the film, so I think it would be really great to read the book first and then check out the movie later to kind of see how they compare. It's supposed to be full of like dark humor, satire about society, and some really creative and unique writing. Plus, there's a lot of commentary on like youth culture and rebellion. It's such a classic that I feel a little bit embarrassed not to have read it yet. And actually, I feel maybe even a little bit more embarrassed that I haven't seen the film either. Definitely got to fix that. But first, the book. All right, I already mentioned this writer's name previously. It's Joe Abercrombie and The Trouble with Peace. So this is the second book in the Age of Madness trilogy. So I'm not going to say too much about it because, like I say, it's the second in the trilogy, which is also part of a larger series. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone that's reading it or that's planning on reading it. I'll just say that last month I read A Little Hatred, which is the first book in the Age of Madness trilogy, and I already know that that is probably going to be one of the better books that I read this year. Joe Abercrombie can just do no wrong in my eyes. I want to read everything that he's ever written, and in all honesty, I almost have. which, is a little bit sad. The next book that I'd love to read in March is Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. I've only got the Kindle version of that. And I've never read anything by Terry Pratchett, but Discworld is so massively popular that I feel like I've at least got to give it a try, right? I've heard a lot about it from another BookTube channel called The Book Thing, and Mark, who's on there, and he reviews every book in the series. I think he's maybe about halfway through the entire series. So if you like Discworld, that's a good channel to check out. The Book Thing. Honestly, the reason I've been a little bit hesitant and avoiding reading Terry Pratchett is that I'm a little bit worried that I won't enjoy the humor. I, for example, didn't like the humor in A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. To me, that sort of humor is a bit random, bit goofy, and just isn't my thing. I haven't even watched any of the Discworld miniseries that came out. I think they had The Color of Magic came out with David Jason. Didn't watch that. There was even one miniseries where my second cousin was the lead actress, and that was, I think it was The Hogfather, where she starred in that. I haven't watched it. And the reason that I haven't is because I don't know. I just don't know if it's going to be my thing. It's also the reason that I'm getting a bit carried away here. It's also the reason that I haven't read Dungeon Crawler Carl, because I think that it relies so heavily on the brand of humor, and I know that everybody loves Dungeon Crawler Carl. Everybody loves this series, and I'm just a bit worried that I'm going to read it and go, guys, it's not for me. It's not for me. The humor is not my sort of thing. So we'll see. You've sooner or later you've got to try these things. And so I'm starting with Small Gods because I heard that it works as a standalone, even though it's part of the series. It also works as a standalone novel. So even if I read it, kind of dip in and dip out and decide, actually, I'm not going to read the rest of the series, it's fine. I still read a standalone novel. The book is about a young novice named Bruther who hears the voice of his god, Ohm. And Ohm, I think that's how you're pronouncing it, Ohm, has been transformed into a powerless tortoise. And so Bruther has to help his god regain his power. It sounds interesting. This is basically a test run for me to see if Terry Pratchett's brand of fantasy is something that I would enjoy, or if it's, just something that I'll leave everyone else to enjoy, because everyone else loves it. The good thing is, though, that if I like it, then I think there's about 40 other books to read in the series. So that's a rich vein. Okay, so the next one is Seed by Ania Ahlborn. This is about a man named Jack. It's a horror novel who, as a child, was haunted by this dark, evil presence, probably this little fella. And he thought that he'd left that all behind in his childhood when he left his hometown in rural Georgia, probably quite close to where I live. But now he has a family of his own, and his daughter has started to show signs of being haunted by that same entity from when he was a kid. And Jack realizes that his past is coming back to torment him and his family, and he has to figure out what this strange evil is so that he can protect them. This book is supposed to be just really creepy, very atmospheric, almost oppressive writing that slowly builds tension. I really like it when stories can involve family curses, and this one I think seems to explore the fear of passing down evil to the next generation. It just sounds like that kind of just classic creepy horror story. And I'd love to give it a go. Okay, so those are your contestants. Now let's spin the wheel to see which book I'll be reading first for the month of March. And actually, just before I spin the wheel, I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. Your support makes Paperback Journeys possible, and you help me to keep putting out these videos, building this community, and creating a fun place where we can all share our love of books. So a big thank you to the cult members. It's not a cult. It's not a cult. Anyone saying it's a cult, it's not a cult. The named men, and an extra special thank you to the quartet. I love you as much as millennials love avocado. That's a lot of love, baby. So if you like this channel and you'd like to support it and get some perks as well, like the read-along, then you can click on the link in the description box below. Okay, so let's spin. Are you ready? All right. So the first book that we'll be reading is Horns by Joe Hill. By the way, I should mention that we go by this thing, we don't go by this thing, we go by this thing. All right, so Horns by Joe Hill is the first book. Very excited to read that. I love a bit of Joe Hill. Okay, next book. The Goblin Emperor. And I don't know if you can hear my dog scratching at the door. Do you want to see my dog? I'll go get him. Yes, you're going to say hello to everyone? Yes, look. Look, Poe, it's everyone. It's everyone. His name is Poe. He is named after Edgar Allan Poe, aren't you? Yeah, he is. He's named after Edgar Allan Poe, and that is because I'm a pretentious prick. All right, say goodbye to everyone. Bye-bye. Okay, sorry, so where were we? The Goblin Emperor. So, yeah, this is going to be a nice bit of light-hearted fun. Can we have some fun? Does everything have to be so dark and dismal? No. This is going to be good. Okay, next up. The Trouble with Peace. So, yeah, some things do have to be dark and dismal. You know, so, some things do have to be dark and dismal, but it's good to have a balance, is what I'm saying. All right, and then the final one, the Goblin Emperor again. All right, and then the final one, Small Gods. All right, okay, so Small Gods, that sounds pretty fun, don't it? Small Gods. All right, so more fun. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We've got, what was the first one? Horns, then the Goblin Emperor, then, wow, this is really fantasy heavy. Are they all fantasies? They are. Listen, this is a fantasy channel now. So, yeah, all right. So 4 fantasy books. That's good. Oh, but by the way, we didn't talk about the book club pick. Is that going to be a fantasy as well? But before I get into the book club pick, here's the question for you, and I want you to answer this. Do you think that you can guess what I'm going to rate each of these books? You can give it a go and play the rating game on the Discord, and if your guesses are the most accurate, then you will win an Amazon voucher, and I don't know, maybe you'll be able to buy yourself a book with it. We've got a lot of fun and games on the Discord, and so if you wanted to join in some of them, then the link is in the description along with the Patreon and all those other links, and that is also where the book club discussion happens. And speaking of which, it's time to reveal to you what you, the audience, and the book club members chose to read for the month of March. And that book is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. It was the runner-up the month before. This month, it's won. So if you're interested in reading along with the book club for The Parable of the Sower, and I think we're going to have a really deep discussion about this book. I think we're not going to be able to help it. Then these are the dates that we're going to be discussing the chapters of the book. Again, link to the Patreon is down below, so you can sign up if you're interested. And also, this is the perfect time to vote on what the book club will be reading in April as well. So you can see all of the options that are available there. I think there's some pretty good ones. The read-alongs are pretty informal as well. You know, rather than the regular regular book reviews that I do like this with all like the lights and the background and all that kind of stuff, the book club reactions look a little bit more like this.
Guys, it's so early. That I felt really just endeared me to the group so much. Again, it was only a small little bit of levity in the darkness. And this is, I've got a couple of questions for you in this little video.
If you're interested in the read along, we're a very welcoming group and we'd love to see you there. And if you're interested in seeing what I read last month and what I thought of those books, then you can click up here to see that video. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy reading.